Hi, my name's Dennis and this is Dennis Elanius, videos about the various things I do to keep myself entertained since my cancer diagnosis. In this video, I want to share some tips to make using mats with the Cricut Maker easier, based on my experiences over the last 5 years. Use other brands. The first tip is simply not to use Cricut brand mats. If you do a search for Cricut mat on Amazon, you'll find lots of other brands making compatible mats at vastly lower prices than Cricut branded ones. You might think that the quality would be lower, as I originally did, but I've tried a couple of other brands now, specifically Nycapa and Lyre Vinyl, and both have been very good. In fact, I'd say the Lyre Vinyl ones are actually better than the Cricut ones. This goes for other materials and consumables that Cricut sell too. They have a hefty markup compared with other brands, and I've not found the quality to be any better. At this point, there are third parties making apparently identical handheld tools, pens, mats, foil, vinyl, and even the machine tools to the ones that Cricut sell, but at a significantly lower price. Keep the right protective cover sheet with the right mat. Simply write over the text at the top of the mat on its cover sheet in Sharpie, so you're consistently putting the right cover back on the right mat, and keeping the same cleaner side to the adhesive. Make sure that you're always putting the cover sheet back on after use to avoid dust and lint getting stuck to the adhesive, which will shorten the life of the mat. Keep track of how long you've used a mat. To see how long your mats are lasting and to determine when you might want to start using a new one, write the date of first use on the back of the mat. Clean your mats when they become less adhesive. You can revive a mat that's not holding your materials as well as it used to by cleaning it. Make sure not to use alcohol, which is likely to remove the adhesive altogether. Wet wipes work well. I would suggest testing a small area first though, to make sure that the adhesive isn't going to be removed. You'll need to wait for the liquid to dry before you can tell, as the presence of moisture does temporarily stop the adhesive from working. I write the date of cleaning under the date I started using the mat on the back, so I can easily tell how many times I've cleaned the mat and how long ago. Get your machine to draw the usable area onto your mat. This is my favourite tip for getting the most out of mats. When you want to apply a design to a full A4 or A5 sheet, you can ensure good alignment by having the Cricut Maker draw the boundaries of those sheets onto the mat. I do this for both portrait and landscape, except with an A4 sheet in landscape, it's just slightly too wide for the machine to cope with, given the margins on a 12 by 12 inch mat. You can make it do the portrait marks simply by telling the machine you're using a 12 by 24 inch mat though, so you can get around that part. Okay, so let's have a look at how we add those marks to Cricut Design Space. So I've already created an SVG with the guidelines in it, and you can download this from the link in the description. When I upload that to Cricut Design Space, I can then select it and add to canvas. Check that the image is at the correct size, which you can do by looking in the size section. It should be 21 centimeters wide by 29.7 centimeters tall. And then you need to make sure that all of those are going to be pen marks drawn with a black pen. Then once you've done that, select all of the objects and attach them. That way they will retain their relative positions to each other, and we can press make. And this then appears, as I mentioned, on a 12 by 24 inch mat. So you can click OK to that. But as I say, it doesn't matter. It's only going to draw within the area of the mat anyway. So although it thinks it's drawing on a 12 by 24 inch mat, all of the pen marks do fit on the 12 inch mat, so it won't be a problem. Now click continue. And once it's detected the machine, tell it that you're using thin paper, copy paper is pretty thin, and then all you have to do is load the mat without anything stuck to it into the machine, and your black pen in clamp A. So now we can press done. So now let's go into CorelDRAW and look at how we will take advantage of those marks on the page to ensure that our design is placed exactly in the right location on an A4 sheet. So to start with, you want to create guidelines at 0 and at the top of the page, which will be 297 millimeters. And then ensuring that you're snapping to the grid, you can draw a line simply going from the intersection of those two guidelines to a point about a centimetre across, say. And that is going to be rendered in a tool that you're not actually going to put into the machine. So I usually use a pen for that, particularly if there's no pen work involved in that piece. You could still use a pen if you choose that to be a different colour from any other pen work you're doing. So to remind myself, I usually set the outline of that to red, and that way it just reminds me that that's my marker for positioning, and that I should make it a pen that I'm not going to use. So having put that marker there, you can then put whatever design or shape you want to draw, cut out, or whatever on that sheet of paper. So let's have a box that we draw on the page, and it is a centimetre away from the edge of the page all the way around. So that's going to be 200 millimetres wide. That was position, not width. 200 wide, and we want to unlock it and then make it 287 tall. And then if I centre that, then in actual fact that's half a centimetre all the way around, because of course we've done 1 centimetre smaller, and we've got half a centimetre on each side. So let's save that. And then let's export it as an SVG. And it's important that you use SVG for this, because then you end up with objects rather than individual pixels as you would in, for example, a PNG, and that would then not work. And I mistyped the file name. I've got CDR there. Let's delete that and export. I don't want to export just the selected elements, I want everything. And then I also need to make sure that I am using 1-to-1 units, so everything stays at the same scale. If you were using any text in the design, you should have that converted to curves to ensure that the Cricut will actually render it. And then simply click OK. So now back in Cricut Maker, let's upload that file that we've created. There it is, and then upload it, select it and add to the canvas, and so we can now see our shape. First thing we want to do is make sure that our alignment mark is in pen, and let's set it to a colour that we're not using, so let's say Very Berry, for example. And then we will also want to make this drawn as well. So that again wants to be a pen mark. It doesn't really matter what colour we select because we can choose what pen to put in at the time. But let's say we'll draw it in dark green. So now we can hit make. No, we can't. Before we do, it's always important to remember to attach those so that they remain in relation to each other. If they're not attached, what happens is that you end up with your marks all starting at the top left of the page. And in fact, you can't see one because it's under the other. So that's not helpful. What we need to do is make sure that they are indeed attached, and then go to make. And now you can see that our green line is separate from our red line. Then we continue. And let's just use actual copy paper to do this. So it's just a demo. I'm not doing anything which requires anything better. So let's get that loaded up onto the sheet and then into the Cricut Maker. So here's our mat with the marks on it and our sheet of paper. We want to then carefully align the marks and the piece of paper so that they're evenly distributed and the paper is smoothly adhered to the mat. Just to be double sure, we can use the brayer tool to ensure that it is fully stuck down. And now it's time to load it into the Cricut Maker. So note here that the first pen it wants is the Very Berry or red coloured one, which you'll remember is the alignment tool. So we don't want a pen in while it does that. So we want to load the mat, run the program by pressing the play button, and then it will prompt when it wants the other colour pen, and that's when we put the green one in. So now looking at this line on the page, you can see it is very evenly spaced from the edges. So we've succeeded in making sure that the alignment is close. It won't necessarily be perfectly accurate because there is a little bit of tolerance in the machine in terms of exactly where it's marking at any given moment. One thing that will help though is making sure that you consistently put your mat in the same position. Always have it pushed up against the left edge. And that way it's going to be as close as possible to accurate. So now we can remove the paper from the mat, remembering that you always peel the mat away from the paper and not the other way around. That avoids having the paper curling. You will notice here that it has actually left a bit of the pen marks from the mat on here. Leaving the mat with more time to dry will avoid that problem to some extent, but in this case it was just a scrap piece of paper, so it doesn't really matter. So as always, remember to put the cover sheet back onto the mat, and then I have a hook on the side of my cupboard where I store my mats so they stay nice and straight and don't get curled up. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.